My name is Eleazar Gonzalez. Today we are going to present session 4 of the Gardenpreneurship webinar series. Today's topic is saving seeds, collecting seeds, pollinators. We are going to be talking about these two topics because they connect, they can not be separated. And our host or presenter today is Dr. Nadia Navarrete Tyndall. She works here at Lincoln University. She's an associate professor, and she has a very large experience on native plant and specialty crops. I'm going to let Nadia to present. Now, and Nadia is going to present the first part of this webinar, and then I will be presenting the second part of the webinar. This webinar has two parts. So you will have two presenters today. Please, Nadia, Dr. Nadia Navarrete, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. It's nice to be with everyone. And as he says, I have my background is in native plants and work with also with specialty crops. And later on, we're gonna have more webinars so we can talk more about details, what specialty crops are. Today, the part that I'm gonna be presenting is about pollinators and seed production. I just wanna share my email. If you, everyone is, feel free to contact me for questions. There is a missing dot between Lincoln.edu should be. That's my email. And I also have a Facebook page that is called Native Plants and More, where you can have all kinds of pictures about native plants that I post regularly. I also a member and advisor of the Grow Native, which is an organization that promotes and supports businesses that grow native plants for profit. In my case, I just do it for education. And on the right hand, you can see a prairie that has been reconstructed at a conservation area where I work. And the plants in the middle are prairie blazing stars. And I can share with you later on. So today, my outline would be about what pollination is. It will be just an introduction. It might be redundant for some of you, but I just want to be sure everybody understands what pollination is. Then we're gonna cover Botany 101, flower to fruit. And later on, Dr. Gonzalez will make the connection to why we're talking about pollinators and seed production. Next, we are talking about who the pollinators are, then why should we care about them, and what we can do to help them. The first slide is about pollination, what pollination is. I have my sources from universities and also from a society, the Cersei Society, and you see it a lot in my presentation. So you can, later on, if you want more information, you can check their websites. So what is pollination? It's just simply the transfer of pollen from one flower to another flower, but specifically from the male part of a flower that is the stamen that produces the pollen to the stigma that connects to the ovary, which is the female part of the flower. I put this question because sometimes we wonder, I'm sure that some of you know it, can pollination occur without pollinators? And the answer is yes, it can occur, but it's very limited there are some, for example, there are crops like corn and other grains that can be wind pollinated, and like trees like oaks and pines also can be pollinated by wind. Tomatoes can be pollinated by wind, but the production can be low. And it could be down to 30% of the flowering plants that are pollinated by wind. Now, when in the presence of pollinators, we have all this diversity. We have color, we have diversity, we have loss of flavor, and we have beauty, because the pollinators are moving this pollen from one flower to another. Sorry. Oh, previous. And I just want to show you this diagram of the tomato. Sometimes we don't make the connection of flower and fruit, but if you can see, we have the part of the female flower I mentioned it has the ovary and the ovules here. The ovules will become the seed, and the ovary will become the fruit. So essentially, this is the tiny tomato that is inside of the flower, and once pollinated, it would start enlarging and becoming the tomatoes that we love so much. Another example of how fruits are formed in nature, we have persimmon. I put this one because it's a native fruit that is very common in our area. And this plant, or this tree, has male flowers in separate trees from the female flowers. So we have, in one tree, you will see the male flowers, and in another tree, you'll see the female flowers. And the female flowers will produce the fruit. As you can see here, this is a male, it wilted after pollination, and then here is a female with your fruit forming that will become a very juicy and tasty fruit. Another example in vegetables, pumpkin and zucchini and other cucurbits also have male and female flowers. The male, again, will provide the pollen, and the female will have the ovary that is being pollinated by pollinators. And in the case of squashes and pumpkin, we have a very specific pollinator. So next, who are the pollinators? We know, probably all know, honeybees. We all connect with honeybees. We know that they help us for fruit production, and fruit orchards are really needed for pollination. But also, native wasps can be pollinators. Native bees can be pollinators. And if you see, the diversity of insects is really high. In this, I'm just showing you 2 species of wasps. These 2 species of flies that are really showy. One is actually mimicking the colors of honeybees. So sometimes you might think that it's a honeybee, but it's actually a fly. And when we talk about flies, don't just relate to house flies. House flies are actually pollinators too. That is not the only flies we have. We have diversity in there. They pollinate. And native bees are the most abundant and most efficient pollinators, including bumblebees and sweat bees. Sometimes they sting us by chance because they are, when we're sweating, they light the sweat from our body, and then sometimes we get stung by accident. But they're good pollinators too, even the bees that stung us. And then we have beetles. They can be pollinators. Butterflies can be pollinators, birds, and I just have a picture of the honeybee that is one of the pollinators that we really need in our gardens. So why should we care about pollinators? We already learned what pollination is. It's just the transfer of pollen from one flower to another, and it helps with seed, fruit, and seed production. That just examples that depend entirely, of fruits that depend entirely on pollination. Apples, pumpkins, strawberries, plums, and many more, persimmons. And vegetables all need pollinators. Why? Because we need seed so we can grow our radishes, our turnips, our lettuce, etc. Just to show you what happens when pollinators are not present, I have a picture of strawberries. These perfect, beautiful looking strawberries, we grew them at home. We have so many pollinators at home because we have many native plants in our yard. But and I got these pictures from our website from the University of California, where some of the fruits are deformed because they lack the lack of presence of pollinators. We need more time to talk about these things, but this is just an introduction. Another reason why we should have pollinators is that cherry, for example, in this case, we have I'm so sorry. We have a study being done. This Cersei Society works with many universities, and this is one where they show that native bees are increase the production of cherry tomatoes. And I found another study in Australia where they have done the same with different kinds of tomatoes. I mentioned at the beginning that tomatoes can be self-pollinated or by wind, or even people can do that. But the presence of bees would increase and improve the quality of the fruit. Another reason why we should care about pollinators. Wildlife depend on pollinators for their survival. And we're talking from songbirds to grizzly bears. This is a little dark photo, but I just want to show you this is a robin eating fruits from American holly. They depend on berries during the winter time. So if we need to bring pollinators for our birds and other wildlife. So there is I'd like to emphasize is that there is an interdependency. We talk between plants and insects. I mentioned that the squash bees are responsible for pollination in cucurbits like cucumber and squash. So the squash bee depend on the plants, which is they need the nectar and pollen, and at the same time, the squash and other cucurbits will need squash for fruit production. So the last part is how can we help them? All pollinators, remember, from wasps to birds and bees, they all need high quality habitat. What do they need for survival? The first really important thing to consider is that they need to have food, which is pollen and nectar from flowers. How do we do that? We provide abundance of flowers, diversity of flowers, so we can increase diversity of insects. And this has to be done through the growing season. Flowers can be established as companion plants next to your vegetable garden. There's some, and I'll give you some examples. Some of the perennial plants can be grown in a separate garden next to your vegetable garden or around it. And annuals can be planted right next to your vegetables. So for pollinators to survive, to succeed and to diversify, they need flowers in the spring, summer, and fall. In the spring, they can be provided, the nectar and pollen is provided by trees and wildflowers, spring wildflowers, like this one at the bottom from the red bud, and it blooms really early in the spring. Then we have in the summertime, there are more flowers from milkweeds to sunflowers. And then in the fall, we have goldenrod and this blue sage that blooms in the fall. Some other native wildflowers to consider for a native plant garden are purple coneflower. They're pretty popular and very attractive for bees and other pollinators. Oxeye sunflower is so beautiful. As you can see, they are related to sunflowers. They look alike. And then swan milkweed and butterfly milkweed, they are not only important for your pollinators, but for our beautiful monarch butterfly is a host plant for the larva. And bergamot, that is can be also attractive for pollinators, and you can use the leaves for tea. There are some annuals. For example, Sarah provided this photo of borage that she uses in her yard to bring the pollinators. And then we have zinnias. Zinnias are very attractive, and they really make beautiful cut flowers too. And marigolds, I had to check the sources that marigolds can be good. They can attract pollinators. But one thing to consider is not to include in your yard double flowers, which means that when the flowers are so beautiful, it's just pure petals, it means all the time that the stamens and the male and female part of the flower has been reduced to a point that they're not good for pollinators. So the simpler your flowers they are, like this zinnia here, just single petal, one layer of petals, the better for your pollinators. So the second thing to consider for pollinators, they need shelter and nesting sites. Native bees that are the most efficient pollinators, they can be either ground nesting or they can be cavity nesting. And you can see in these photos, the first photo, it shows you, it looks like an untidy mass of shrubs, but this could be a good, even if you leave a small pile in your yard, it's good for bumblebees. Bumblebees like to nest under piles of sticks. They're protected, and they do their nest in the ground. And there are others just like open ground. So don't mulch to death, as I tell people. Just if you want to leave areas unmulched and open are good for bees. And other like having nesting, like these bamboo-looking stems. There are some native plants like elderberry that can be used for that purpose. And I mentioned like the milkweed, that is the host plant for monarch butterflies. So if we provide everything in this slide, we'll be increasing our pollinator diversity. Then we'll have good fruit and seed production in our yard. And last but not least is another really important thing to consider is that insects, pollinators, birds, wildlife in general, and even us need to be protected from pesticides. I suggest to avoid 7 because for me it's very detrimental for anybody. It can be poisonous if it's not used correctly. And what we call neonicotinoids. We won't go through all this information, but I have just some the name of a few insecticides that shouldn't be used because they are systemic, which means that it stay in the pollen of flowers, and you might think that you're buying a nice plant from back stores like Home Depot, and you think that you're providing a good flower for your plants, but they die because they have been treated with neonicotinoids. And we can talk about that later. There's so much to talk about it. So, but if you need to use pesticides, do it carefully, read the label to apply enough amounts, avoid using it when the insects are very active, and do not apply pesticide or herbicides during windy days. I have neighbors that have done it to me, and I end up losing plants because that's not nice to do it. And the last thing I just want to share, since we don't have much time, this is a publication about organic pesticides. If you are interested in that, and hopefully, I don't know if Dr. Clements in session 6 will cover it, but this is a publication that can be downloaded from the Cersei Society. And this presentation will be shared with you. And last, I have some resources. I have books, and I think for me, it's nicer to have books. When I'm talking about native plants, I like to have the books with me so I can identify them. And the book, Bringing Nature Home, if you like to read, is the best book to get you excited about pollinators and why we should protect them. And with that, I finish my presentation, and I would let you continue with Dr. Gonzalez. Thank you.
My name, as you know, Eleazar Gonzalez. I am an agronomist. In my formation, I study agriculture in Mexico, and then I did economics, and then I came to the USA to study agricultural cooperatives, and then I finished my PhD in sociology. I have been working with farmers about developing programs for them to improve their farming activities. And I grew in a farm in Mexico. When I was a kid, I always was wondering how we were collecting our seeds and what's happened later on when I moved to the city, or when my dad started buying seeds and we didn't collect seeds anymore. I remember when I was a kid, we used to go every morning to collect our corn and our beans, and it was a very great experience. So with that introduction, I'm going to start presenting about collecting seeds and saving your seeds. Can you see this?
Yes.
Good. We will be talking in this presentation about collecting and preserving seeds. The outline for this presentation is as follows. We will tell a little bit about what are the benefits of saving seeds from our gardens, seed varieties, seed saving and methods, storing and preserving seeds, and finding seeds and selling and seedlings in your area. First, I want to introduce these two pictures. These pictures belong to a Latino gardener here in Missouri. And this picture in the bottom is one of the gardens we just create. This one is in Columbia, Missouri. This is Veronica's garden. She is part of this webinar. And we are promoting this kind of garden right now with this program. We had another garden here in Jefferson City, but I just get this picture from here, and we made the event this weekend on Saturday. That's how it looked like. Well, let's talk about what are the benefits for saving your seeds. First, there is a social benefit. The social benefit is to create your own food. You create your own source of food. You increase your household food security. And also you educate others to reduce dependence on food. In the healthy side, you will be able to be more active. That connection you will have with your garden will help you to feel much better, to reduce your stress and get a natural connection with natural elements. Also, we have economics benefits. The economics benefit of doing gardening, you will reduce the gardening production costs with the proposal we are showing you here. You will increase household economic benefits too. There are some natural benefits to the environment, so you will be able to sustain the ecological diversity of crops. And the cultural benefits is like we will be able to inherit these habits to our kids or to friends or whoever is surrounding us when they interact with us in the garden. Then we will be able to develop this behavior of making of living. That is something we can provide or can contribute to the next generation. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about seed varieties. The seed varieties you will be able to collect from your garden or to continue your gardening activities without buying seeds is a seed variety that allow you to produce the same crop with the same characteristics. And that varieties are the heirloom varieties. So you will be able to, with the reproductive process, you will keep the genetic information in the next generation of seed. That means you will produce similar plants. And the good thing about the stem, but also is also a challenge because it is produced by open pollination. What it means is like it is produced by air, by insects, or you can also produce by connecting the pollens of the plant, but it has to be from the same variety. If you bring different varieties to your garden, you will cross-pollinate, and you will not have the same characteristics in your next generation. So let's talk a little bit more about what hybrids are. Hybrid seeds, they are more profile-oriented seeds because they take time to create, and also they follow trails to be tested in the field, and that costs money. But what you get is a seed that guarantee to give you what they say. The bad thing about this thing is you won't be able to use it the next season. You won't be able to save it. You will save it if you want and seed it, but you may not have what you want. That is the situation with the hybrids. Normally, there is a market for this. Organic producers, conventional farmers use this kind of seeds. The other variety is the genetically modified organisms or genetically modified seeds. These seeds are, created in labs. They are not cross-pollinated and not open-pollinated. They have specific trials. If you want to produce a seed to control for specific factors in the environment, this is the seed you need to follow, but this is not for you. because you are too small. This is mainly used on conventional and industrial agriculture. Next, let's talk about saving seed methods. We will talk about 3 ways to save your seeds, because you mainly will have 3 sources of seeds in your garden. One will be fruit. You will save seeds from your watermelons, from your tomatoes, from peppers, from pumpkins, zucchinis, anything that has this kind of characteristics. You know what comes from your garden. You can also include here other crops. And also you will collect seeds from flowers. Flowers, you collect the seed directly when it's dry. I will show you a video after this about how you do that. Also, you collect seeds from pots. That is when you have green beans or radish, peas, or this kind of crops, they will come out of the pot. There is more about seed saving methods. Well, when you get seed from fruit, you will dry the crop, and then when you get past the ripening point, you will be able to collect your seed. Also, you can use a fermentation method. Seed from flowers, like this one, you will be able to collect seed from them after they dry. And also you will be able to collect seeds from pot after they dry. And next, I will show you, well, after this one, we are going to be talking a little bit about storing and preserving seeds. And you will mainly use glass containers to preserve your seeds. Why glass containers? Well, glass containers are the more effective to maintain moisture out of the seed, of the container, because you have to dry the seed. They need to be very well dry to be able to keep the viability or to be able to germinate next season or after 2 seasons. Normally, you cannot keep it too long, but there are methods to keep it long. You can use plastic bags. You can use paper envelopes. And one very important thing is that you have to label them. You need to write down here in the container the seed variety, the day, how you got that seed, and then you need to keep it in a dry, cool, and dark place. In order to summarize this method, this seed production, I had a short video. It is a little bit noisy because this one was made out of the house, my house, your house, and I live in the side of the highway. You will hear some cars running by. We try to reduce the noise, but there are some subtitles, so you will be able to understand. This is the video. Put the volume up if you don't have the volume up. Okay.
And we are not effective. We want to be more independent in one extent, and the only way to do that is to select varieties that you are able to feed next season, and those varieties will be the heirloom varieties. There are other kind of varieties like hybrid that you won't be able to. You will select the seed and you can seed again, but you will not have the same characteristics of the crop next season. And the other side, heirloom allow you to do that. They are also pollinated seeds, and as far as you don't bring other varieties inside the garden, you will know cross-pollinated. Let's start with 3 sources of seeds. We are going to talk about how you collect seeds from fruit. We have all these fruits that normally all gardeners have, like bell squash, peppers, tomatoes, zucchinis. But all of these crops have the same characteristics. The seed is inside the fruit, inside the product. In order to collect your product, you will need ripening point. Once the crop or the fruit past the ripening point, then the seed gets maturation. When the seed gets ready for you to collect. On the other side, if you want to select a crop and you want to collect the seed from the fruit, you have to put the fruit and collect the seed from inside. I'm going to show you one example how you can do that. This is a tomato, it's a Roma tomato, and the only way to do it is you put the tomato and you are going to collect the seed from inside. You can see the seed right here. What you do in this case, you don't let the seed go to the ripening point, you will ferment the seed. So what you do, I already get this seed prepared for you. So the seed is inside. I put all the seed out like this. I just have to put the seed inside it, like that. And then you wait until you will have fermentation process. Let's say 2 days, you will collect your seed out of the container and filter it here. You will see how we are assuming the 2 days pass. And then you are going to use this coffee filter. And then you are going to let this dry after a few days. And then your seed will be ready to start saving. As you can see, the seeds are right there. Okay? There you see. Let's go to collect seeds from flowers. This is a lettuce. It's dry now, but this lettuce, you can collect the seeds from the flowers. There are other lettuce that you collect the seeds from the board, like that one, but we will talk about that one after this one. Let me show you how you collect the seeds from the flower. So this is already was a flower and it's dry. So what you do is you take the flower out. My hand's a little bit white because I put the tomato seeds, but you open the flower and you will see the seeds falling right there. You see it? Right there. See how many seeds you collect? Has to maturate, has to go to very dry point for you to be able to collect the seed. Beans has to stay in the garden, or the next one to stay in the garden for you to be able to collect. I'm going to show you one example of how you can collect your seeds from the plant. On this side we have a lettuce, but the ball has grown to a stage to collect, to produce the pad. And then the pads are dry, and now, so I can collect the seeds. I'm going to put this one here, and I'm going to bring it here. And you can see how it's going to come out. Look, see right here. You found that? You see all these seeds coming out from just this one? So all these seeds are lettuce seeds. Recommend to use glass containers to prevent the seed. Glass container will allow you to get the moisture out of the seed and you keep the seed dry. Don't forget when you take your seed to use a label, so you can put the variety of the seed, the day you collect it, and also where the seed comes from. There are other characteristics about using glass containers that will keep the seed for a long time, so you can use it no next season but the next season. So keep it longer. Also, you can use other containers like plastic bags or envelopes, but we really recommend to use glass containers. And we appreciate you to put attention to training, and let's the next webinar.
That means webinar. Good. Okay. Let's continue with the session. Hope you like it. Next slide is about finding seeds and seedlings in your area. You may wonder, where can I find these products? It's very easy. You just need to look out for local seed retailer, look for other gardeners, what they do. There is a group online. You can connect with them. It's called Seed Exchange Groups. Also, you can go online stores. There are many online stores where you can find heirloom seeds. There are all these sources that they are popular for selling heirloom seeds. And with this, we open this webinar to questions and answers.
Unmute myself.
Let me mute it. Okay, everybody to mute.
I noticed that it said that you have to dry the seeds first, and I didn't know that, and so I had some Swiss chard in the garden, and it looks like it's going to seed, and I was thinking maybe I could just plant those seeds right next to it and I'd get more plants, but I can't. Now I know I have to dry them. Is that right?
Yes, right.
Okay. And to dry them, I just put them in a glass jar?
You can dry, yeah, well, you first let them dry outside and then save it then in the glass container.
Okay.
Let them now dry first, because then if you put them now, they had moisture.
Okay.
But may I add, that is when you're storaging the seed, that you need to keep them really dry so they don't get moldy. And the same thing happens with native plants. You can gather seed of flowers, but they have to be dry before they are stored. But with native plants, if you want to plant them immediately, you can do it. But if you are they go immediately in the soil. But for storage, they need to be dry.
One of the things too, if I might add about Swiss chard and a lot of these some of these crops that kind of will do, a lot of times they'll do a little better with weather. So if you let your Swiss chard go to seed and let it go dry and let it sit there like through the summer, and then toward the fall, you might be able to harvest some of the seed and put that back in the ground like late summer, and maybe get another crop of Swiss chard, collard greens and kale and spinach and several of those types of spring crops. Very often you can let them go to seed and let the seed, let it just stay there over the summer, then harvest and try it back in the soil for the fall.
I had tried to, well, actually harvested some dwarf cherries, and somebody recommended that you put them in the freezer to simulate winter, that they need to be frozen for a little bit of time. Do you know anything about that?
You're talking about, what do you say that you?
It was a fruit tree. They're dwarf cherry trees, small cherry trees. And I took some of this, the fruit from the cherry tree, and then, basically put them in a medicine bottle and put them in the freezer. I haven't really tried to germinate them.
When you take that one out of the freeze, you have to make a special management. What temperature do you have?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Is it frozen or is just on the?
No, it's frozen, and it's supposedly, somebody had told me, well, that it simulates winter. The seed drops to the ground, and then over the winter it freezes, and then sprouts.
Well, I can talk about the perennials in general. Usually the perennial from temperate areas, they need to go through a period of 6 weeks of winter or low temperatures in order to induce germination. So that is, so it could be, it's what is called a stratification, exposed seed to cold and moisture. There are other ways to do it. I'm not completely familiar with cherry, but we do that with native plants that are all perennials, and they average that is 6 weeks, and could be freezing times. Or
Right.
even you can put them in the refrigerator.
Yes, I have a question. We have seen maybe pumpkins or watermelons, which are very big. How do they get to the point where they can, you know, is it the seed? What is it which makes those very big pumpkins or watermelons?
Yeah, in those cases, you let them to pass the ripening point, and the seeds will be okay. You just collect the seed out then.
Sorry, come again. I didn't get you.
Yeah, when you get your fruit, you let pass the ripening point. Like get that to maturate and pass the ripening. Then your seeds has maturate by that time. If you try to get them so early, they have another development inside the fruit that has to be complete. That only happen after they pass the ripening point.
I didn't get you, and I'm not sure whether
So
you got
what
my
is the question?
My question is, I've seen giant pumpkins or giant watermelons, big, or tomatoes. How do the producers, how do they get those big fruits?
Oh,
Mm.
Can I chime in here? Typically what those producers do, they select varieties that produce very large size fruits or vegetables. For example, pumpkins, read the seed packets. There are some that produce very large. And then when the vines have flowers on them, you'll pick like all of them off but one or two. That way the nutrition that the plant takes in goes into producing just those 2 pumpkins. And that's how you'll get those massive ones. Does that make sense to you? So instead of the pumpkin vine producing 15 medium-sized pumpkins, all that nutrition goes into 1 or 2 much larger pumpkins. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
But the seed has to have the potential to be a big one, a big pumpkin. A pie pumpkin is never going to be, 80 pounds. But there are varieties that can get much larger. You just have to read the seed packets.
but also has to consider the genetic of the variety. Like
you have to read the seed packets, yeah.
They gotta really have that genetic to grow that size. If you have a good soil balance and enough nutrients for as many as you want, keep enriching your soil, you will be able to produce many of those. But it has to be with genetic. They are normally hybrids.
Okay.
I have a question. I have some old marigold seeds from a couple of years ago where I grew marigolds and they came out really pretty. So when it was time to throw them away, I just kept the seeds. So is it time for me to plant those now to have a beautiful display of marigolds for the fall?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
do
it is time. Actually, you could have started immediately after the last frost, because marigolds are tropical. They're originally from Mexico, so they can do well right now if you plant them right now.
Oh, thank you.
They're supposed to come out by November. In November is when you collect those. And in Mexico, we call them. They use it for the Day of the Dead, to celebrate the dead. That tradition of America.
Yeah, it's good for the pollinators too.
The only thing you might want to plant them a little heavier than you normally would in terms of the spacing, because a lot of times, depending on the storage, if you've more than a year, sometimes some of the seeds are not as viable. And in other words, The longer you keep seeds, sometimes they're, some of the seeds are not going to germinate. So you generally, if you have older seeds, it's a good idea to space them a little closer than you otherwise would, and then send them if they do come up. I know I just did the same thing with some Nemagon marigolds that were really old, and I just hoped that they would grow, and they were really old, not more than a couple years, and I didn't get much germination at all, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah,
So
I
I
did the
start
same.
them indoors.
I think
Not
you could
now,
directly sow them in the ground now.
Okay.
Yeah, you could just go ahead and plant them. I had some zinnias that I found, and I was like, oh, these were so pretty. And they were way older than I thought they were, and I didn't get anything out of them. I tried.
One thing that I recommend if you want to grow seed like that, of your own seed, put it in a pot. And so, because sometimes you forget where you put them, or you don't know exactly where the seed was planted. So if you put them in pots, you wouldn't tell if they were viable or not. So try it in pots and also directly in the soil. But if you don't have enough seed, we would have I think, I don't know if Jessica is here, that we have some sort of seed to provide to participants. If you are in the Jefferson City area or Columbia, we can share some either plants or seed with you.
And so we will have the soil very soon. Today we place the order on other place.
You're
Well,
too
it's time
quiet,
for me to
Eliazar.
get to my next class, so I'm gonna leave you guys now. Thank you so much, though.
Guys, don't forget to send us the feedback from after session, the testing evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
We will send that
Welcome.
question.
I had one more question. You said that when you harvest seed, you want to let the fruit go past the harvest time.
I think
so. So that is, so it ferments a little bit. Is that the idea behind that? And then you take it and dry it.
There is two ways that can happen. You can take it like before passing the ripening point, then you ferment it in your kitchen. But also the crop or the fruit can ferment it by itself on the field. Some tomatoes do that. Then the seed will get also.
Okay. Okay. I need to leave also. Thank you very much. Thank you for the link. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
See you next week. Any more questions?
I just have one question. I don't know. Can I use a seed that for example, if I want tomatoes, can I use the seeds from the tomatoes that I buy at the store, or those are not good?
But the point about that is you don't know what kind of tomato it is.
Oh.
That is the only thing. But it would be fun. It would be just a test, maybe just a way to get you to do just try an error.
Yeah, do some practice. It won't hurt you to practice. And if you grow tomatoes, you grow tomatoes.
Oh, okay. So I follow the same thing. I just first I made them dry and then planted. Is that how I do if I use some from the store?
You can, if you have tomatoes, you want to seed them right there with the tomato, they will come out. They are so nice. They are good variety. Like tomatoes is one of the products with higher germination and viability.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but if you buy them from the store, you can put them right in the soil. You don't have to let those dry or anything.
Oh, so those don't need to be dry?
No, if you bought seeds from the store.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think she's talking about buying a tomato from the store and then saving the seeds from that tomato.
Yeah, that's what I was.
To let it dry.
Asking. Oh, okay. So how long do I have to let them dry?
Until they're dry.
Oh, but how do I know if they are?
Normally, in 5 weeks, you will have very dry tomato.
Oh, 5 weeks.
Oh, okay. 2 weeks, 2 to 5 weeks, you will have.
Oh, okay.
It will vary. That's what we need to make science in this way, because to grow natural products, we had a lot of goals to prove significantly, scientifically prove how this happened. But that is something we need to promote.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if anybody's gonna have more questions, but I'd like to I mentioned that I have a nursery. We have a nursery here at Lincoln University where we grow all kinds of native plants, and also we're gonna have tomatoes for participants. But we are either here in Jeff City or we both live in Colombia. So either way, and the nursery where we have a greenhouse, and the nursery is right next to it, and it's open for visitors, but we can have one at a time, so you can come and see samples of gardening.
What native plants do you have in your garden?
I have lots of them. Everything that you saw in my presentation are here. And most of the plants that I show, I have plants. And later on we're working on a webinar series that it will be about native plants, so it'll be more specific.
Okay. And I have a question on pumpkins. Back home, we believe that when the pumpkin plant is growing, before it starts flowering, if you nip some of the leaves, that will make it produce more. Would you know anything about that?
Yes, Sara, that's your question.
Yes, that will help. It's like tomatoes. You have to work with the crop. There are some unnecessary leaves that you don't want to have. So the nutrients go to the fruit, not to the leaves.
But if you have to nip where it is growing so that it branches off to be able to produce more pumpkins.
Yeah, that is one practice you can do to eliminate some leaf. But yeah, you need also the leaf to make the photosynthesis to attract them.
Yeah, okay. I do intend to visit a pumpkin farm soon. So if amongst the participants here, there's somebody who knows a pumpkin farm and would like to, at some point in time, visit with me to that pumpkin farm, whilst it is still growing before it starts producing pumpkins.
Sounds like you're into pumpkins. You probably have to have your own.
No, I would like to see whether I can promote consumption of pumpkin leaves.
I see.
And I think it goes well if that theory of nipping the shoots, if it enables more pumpkins. I'm hoping to engage at least a farmer to see if we can work on that, where we then promote consumption of the pumpkin leaves. And we can also, so maybe as an experimental plot somewhere. I don't have somewhere to grow currently, but if I can have a farmer who is willing to work with me in that regard.
Hartsburg, Missouri used to be the pumpkin capital of the United States. It is the southern tip of Boone County in the river bottom. So there's at least two people whose ancestors settled that river bottom when it was Hart City. And I can hook you up with both. I can give you the names of both of those farmers.
Okay, and that's Sarah. Okay, that's okay, Sarah, please do. Because definitely I have this passion of working on this pumpkin leaf project. How many of you here, the participants, have tested pumpkin leaves?
Never an idea now.
Yeah. That's a good topic, not only for that, for other crops too. Talking about leaves, like here in Lincoln University, we are promoting what's the name?
Anything. Like a specialty crop. So we could even plant it on campus.
Okay, so I would like somebody I can work with. Is that you, Nadia? Can we work on that project? Because if you've got a plot where we can start off planting pumpkins, the pumpkins, we can, from beginning so that we can work together on a small area. But my intention.
That is a good partnership. I think that is a good idea.
We have a really small area where we could we can grow some pumpkins and right on campus. It's in the area what I was talking about, that we have a teaching greenhouse.
Okay. Can I link up with you, Nadia? Maybe we can link up, Nadia, so that I can see what you have and you see, because I don't know whether it's a specific variety of pumpkin seeds. Maybe they are different. So we can look at that.
Yeah.
And the good thing about a pumpkin, when we are talking about seeds, is also one of the plants where you can use the seeds from the pumpkin you grow for the next crop.
Yeah.
So it fits with the topic that we've been covering today on seeds.
Then we can work with Sarah and then do some recipe with the leaves.
That's what I intend to do. The recipes I already have, and then so I'd like to link, and then from there, if it works, then we can be, promoting it on a bigger farm, on a bigger scale, you know.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll link up with you, Nadia, and also Sarah, feel free to send me the emails of or the contact numbers of those farmers you're talking about.
Okay.
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 Now let's turn to the question. We are at 66 now. We passed the time. Sorry. But it's a very interesting topic. I guess everybody is interested.
Yeah, that's interesting about pumpkins. But my email is in my presentation, so
yes, I copied it, so I'll email you.
And I will send now a survey for everybody to respond. So you can give us some feedback, and we can see if we did good in this presentation or how far we did, and then we can improve for next time. Thank you everybody for attending this webinar. We are looking forward for the next week webinar, and Dr. Nadia is going to be presenting about working on the garden bed, and what strategies you will need to follow to make a very productive garden and manage your garden, your companion plants and your native plants you have native. And thank you everybody again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Eleazar, can you stay just a second?
Yeah.
Packy's not here, is it?
I didn't see her.
She wanna do. Okay. Okay.
Did you see my note, Nadia? The last one?
Yeah, I thought that I responded.
Yeah, and I gave you another one too.
Oh. Yeah, we can work with her.
Yeah, she's pretty cool.
That sounds good. Like I do something with sweet potatoes too.
Yeah, she's pretty cool.
With so many things. Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
But didn't stay.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Nadia. You want time the phone, Nadia? Close this thing because it's recording.
Go.
I will stop the recording now.
Okay.
Tell me.
Any comment?